great and honored actually to welcome a good friend and the leading expert on India-China relationship, especially on the issue of Tibet. We all know Ranade ji, if you watch Indian television, he is among the experts who is called to enlighten the Indian population on the issue, wide range of issues actually. So it's very fortunate that he is here among us. And the weather also is much better today. And we all know that Jayadeva Ranade ji is a member of the National Security Advisory Board of India and also the president of Center for China Analysis and Strategy, as the former additional secretary in the Cabinet Secretariat. He has served in various capacities around the world, particularly in Hong Kong and China-related places, and he has also been to Washington DC as well. And he's also a member of the core group on China of the Indian Council of World Affairs and distinguished fellow at the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies in New Delhi. And one thing I really admire about Ranade ji is that whenever he writes something in major newspapers in India and around the world, he's very detailed and meticulous in his research. So he's not experts who writes in broad stroke and concludes something. When he says something, it is meticulously backed by empirical evidence. And one thing about Ranade ji is that, given his knowledge and interest about Tibet, he has kept the fire burning in the corridors of Delhi. And through him, I think many people in India, particularly among the leading intellectuals, their curiosity, interest, and increasingly now support for Tibet is there in India as well. So once again, it's a great privilege and honor to receive him here, person of such stature and wisdom, to come to Delhi, to come to Dharamsala and enlighten us. I think the word Deva means God. So we have none other than Deva who is here to enlighten us on the topic, prospects of resetting India-China relation. I think it's also topic is very timely because the National Security Advisor, Dovalji, has just returned, has just met with his Chinese counterpart, and Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji is very soon visiting China in May. So, and then we all have read the incursions in Ladakh in recent days. With all this news going around, I think Ranade ji is the right person at the right time to enlighten us on these major issues. And feel free to divert from the topic, and you can always share your thoughts on the issue of Tibet as well. So with that note, welcome to Ranade ji, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Lukchang Sangye, for the introduction, very kind introduction. And greetings to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here in McLeodganj always. And I can't presume to really brief you on what's happening. I think you're all as well informed. You're certainly plugged into what's happening in the world around us. But the topic itself, resetting of India-China relations, is, I think, something which is quite critical today. It's happening at a time when, in fact, the world itself is undergoing a reset. We have a situation where the major powers are realigning themselves, and they haven't yet firmed up their potential alliances or potential relationships. The major economies are still fragile. They haven't settled down. They haven't been able to start an upward swing as yet. And in this backdrop, we have a China which is resurgent. It's militarily and economically very strong, and its decision to assert itself coincided with the downturn in the global economy. I think deliberately, but that is the scenario that we see today. It would have continued as it was, and as far as India-China relations are concerned, I think there was a disadvantage that we had, and we still have to some extent, in terms of just the military aspect. But things have undergone a change, I think, in the last 2 years. In 2012, the China that we saw or we were familiar with was a China that appeared to us as strong, as headed in a certain direction. But the events of 2012, which was the year of the 18th Party Congress, brought home to the Chinese leadership in a very, I would say, it jerked them really, that the systems that they had built up were not as impervious to penetration or as impervious to an outside element trying to get inside as they thought. And the Poshilai event really brought that home to them. What we saw, or what I saw in 2012, was almost an American style of politicking going on in China for the first time. We had some party secretaries talking about reform and trying to implement reform policies, certain others sticking to the party tradition of being secretive and following party discipline. All that was happening. But Poshilai, in his bid to enter the Politburo Standing Committee, which is the highest body, which he had been passed over for on the last time, he pulled out all stops. And what he did was actually three things. He penetrated the PLA in trying to build up a powerful lobby that could back him. He penetrated the security apparatus. First time I think that had happened to this extent. To the extent that even the party center was blocked out of certain activities that he was doing and which the security apparatus should have reported on. And he also tapped into the public sentiment of Maoist ideology. It was more like a Maoist nostalgia that he tapped into. In the process, what he did was he upset the party's core. And when I say core, you know, we all are aware of formal structures. Like here you have a CTA, you have the Kalons, you have the Sichong, you have the others. But there is something else also that keeps it going. It's the old leaders, it's the old cadres who form really that spirit, the core. And that exists in China in the Communist Party. The veteran leaders, some of the strong elements who have been around, they got together because they thought the Chinese Communist Party's monopoly on rule was under threat, that the Chinese Communist Party itself was under threat, and they got together. They also saw one more thing, that Poshilai's police chief, Wang Lichun, though they tried to manipulate him against Poshilai, somewhere in the script that they prepared, he went out of script. He panicked and went out of script and went to the US consulate in Chengdu for shelter, seeking political asylum. That's not just an ordinary act, and they understood it. That any man belonging to the nomenclatura who can go there has had some degree of assurance that he will be given shelter, he will be given asylum, which means some intelligence operatives have been in touch with him. I know that because I used to do that, promise people all kinds of things. But it did happen. And they realized that a person of a level of a vice minister in their security apparatus was keeping very close contact with foreign intelligence officers. And it jolted them. Around that time, two other things happened. There was a sudden consciousness about foreign intelligence activities and people within the Chinese Communist Party falling prey to them, including in the army. And they actually, I think probably for the first time, publicized at least 6 cases. Normally they don't do it. There was also a realization that this penetration may have gone much deeper. So the moment they got Po Xilai out of the scene, 3,000 public security cadres were summoned for re-education. In the Chinese system, re-education is a bad news. You know, it means that you're in real trouble. And they were summoned to Beijing for re-education. But reverting to the main text, when the party core realized that this was happening, they got together and they decided on 2 or 3 things. One, they decided to back the party chief, which is Hu Jintao, fully. So Po Xilai was removed and a tone was set. Second, they decided that we will select Xi Jinping. So all the factions got together and backed him. That was decided. And we saw the result at the time of the 18th Party Congress, when he took over all 3 top posts. That is the party chief, the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, the President of China, and the Chairman of the Central Military Commission at the same time. The last time this had happened was when Hua Kofeng took over in the late 70s after overthrow of Gang of Four, all the 3 posts. So that was a major event. And then we saw something else. The Politburo Standing Committee, when it was constituted, they reduced the number from 9 to 7. But in the process, what they did was, they almost gave, if I may call it, an extended probation to the 6th generation of cadres who are hoping to get in, or at least 1 or 2 of them hoping to get in, and thereby becoming the putative Prime Minister and President. That was deferred. In other words, they're now on extended probation for 5 more years. They'll be watched. So the field is open. Second, we notice that there were no minority representation except 1 long-standing communist cadre who was a Mongol in the Politburo, none in the Politburo Standing Committee. We also saw a pronounced emphasis on doctrinaire apparatchiks entering the Politburo Standing Committee, on traditionalists entering the Politburo Standing Committee, and disciplinarians who would brook no violation, no change or flexibility in party disciplinary policies. So that is the texture that we saw. And since then, what has come to notice is a definitive hardening of the Chinese state. Whether you look at propaganda, whether you look at education, whether you look at censorship, whether you look at party cleansing or corruption in the PLA, so-called corruption, anti-corruption campaigns, they are a process of cleansing the party and cleansing the PLA. And in the process, strengthening the grip of the party chief and the party over the apparatus. So we are seeing that happening. And with that, Xi Jinping, who has emerged as the strongest person there and the leader among the Politburo Standing Committee, is today probably the most powerful man in China after Mao Zedong. In my estimation, that's how I look at him. The Chinese themselves, in their party theoretical magazine, Chusher, have described him as the greatest living communist leader. So his status is, I think, confirmed. And this is a gentleman who pronounced the China Dream. I mention this because this has a relevance to what we're going to discuss. The China Dream essentially has 3 components. To make the Chinese people wealthy, which I think we'll all agree is a good thing, everyone should be wealthy. Make the Chinese nation prosperous, again a good thing. And then he talks about rejuvenating China, rejuvenating the nation, which means also recovering the lost territories. And that is where the problem comes. But this is the China that I see today in front of us, and I think we all see, which is why we are seeing the different countries hedging their bets or reshaping their policies. In the midst of all this, in India, last year, we had an election And for the first time in 30 years, we elected a party with a resounding mandate, the BJP. And Modi was the leader. He was the Prime Minister. Also a man reputed to be decisive, reputed to be bold, and a nationalist. Very much like Xi Jinping, in fact, if you look at it that way. But thrown up by a democracy with all its pulls and pressures. But with the mandate that he got, he does not now have to tailor his statecraft or his geostrategic initiatives to take into account the whims and fancies of various provincial leaders. Like when he moves vis-a-vis Sri Lanka or Nepal, he doesn't have to bother really about what the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu thinks or what the Chief Minister of UP or Bihar thinks. He can go ahead and take a decision, take a call, which is what he's doing. And here is where I would say, in a way, the resetting of the relationship starts. Because at the swearing-in ceremony itself, he took the first step by inviting a set of neighbors of India to the swearing-in ceremony. Forget what happened. I mean, we can go into that in question and answer and all that. But if you just recall whom he called and look at the geographic setting, he has basically laid out the geographic perimeters of India's area of strategic interest. And thereby he has put China on notice that in certain areas our interests collide. In Nepal, our interests collide. In Bhutan, our interests collide. In Sri Lanka, our interests collide. In the Maldives, our interests collide. And just think about it, these are all the areas that are coming to the fore now. So he did that. Then he followed it up with visits to Nepal and to Bhutan. In his conversation with Pakistan, Nawaz Sharif, he was fairly frank about what India's concerns are and what the red lines are, and what Pakistan should desist from. That message also has its own repercussions. That was followed up with his trip to Japan. And in Japan, he made certain calculated remarks, calculated statements, which signaled to China that that ambivalence that we had maintained till as far as the last day of the previous government was now no longer going to be followed. So he made references to the South China Sea. He also made references to increased cooperation with Japan in the defense arena and other places. After that, of course, he went to the US, did the same thing. But more crucial were Xi Jinping's visit here, followed by Obama's visit here. And I think we need to focus on both a little bit. Let's look at Xi Jinping's visit. That was also an attempt at resetting as far as Xi Jinping is concerned. When Modi was campaigning, he was on the campaign trail, the Chinese media projected him as a person who is going to be tougher on China, as a nationalist who's trying to come into power. The Chinese think tanks assessed him somewhat differently. They said what he's saying on the campaign trail is actually rhetoric, is just posturing. Once he comes into power, he'll be like any other Chinese leader. So there was a difference there of how they played. But the Chinese played their cards. They made overtures to him, friendly overtures. And then before the visit, they began putting out a story. And I'm using the word putting out because when you start looking at it, you cannot pinpoint it to an official. Stories began being put out that when Xi Jinping comes here, many deals are going to be signed, billions of dollars are going to be invested. But actually, there was no official statement on that. They also said he's going to come accompanied by a whole lot of businessmen, etc. But when he came here, the Chinese followed their policy of applying economic pressure in India, military pressure in India, while holding out an economic carrot. We saw the incident at Chumar. I think you all know that when he was here in Gujarat, the intrusion at Chumar started. It was not apparently a really planned intrusion in that sense. It developed into one. But make no mistake that Xi Jinping knew fully what is happening. And on our side, when the intrusion started, for the first time, instructions went that we should rebuff the Chinese intrusions. And therefore, our forces went on alert. There was a bit of signaling on both sides. For those of you who've been to the Wagah border, it was something like that. That our division and corps in Ladakh, in Leh, went on alert. The corps commander ordered a number of helicopter flights, and mind you, many of them were empty. They didn't carry anything. But it was to show the Chinese that we are prepared and the division has gone on alert. So there was a lot of heavy movement, etc. The Chinese got the message. There was a standoff. It continued for a while. There were two other things that happened here. The Chinese put out a story. Firstly, the Chinese media did not carry any report about Chumar. And a number of Chinese interlocutors whom I met said nothing happened in Chumar. And if it did, it was your fault. That was their line. But people who normally make excuses for China or who are pro-Chinese individuals, they began saying, actually it happened because of differences between the PLA and the party. That Xi Jinping does not have that firm a grip on the PLA as he should have. That is absolute rubbish. He has a firm grip on the PLA. He's got a system of political commissars, and I referred to the anti-corruption campaign in the PLA. That's something almost 30% of the PLA today is under investigation for corruption. 30% of the officer cadre. I don't think any officer in the PLA today is going to challenge a party man or a party directive, not knowing what his future is going to be. And then the proof came when, in January this year, all three concerned commanders of the areas responsible for Ladakh, for Chumar and for Depsang Plains, both in Ladakh, were promoted to the rank of Major General. Major General is a very important promotion in the Chinese army. So from Senior Colonel, they were promoted to Major General. And those promotions are done by Xi Jinping. It is very difficult for me to imagine that a Supreme Commander will promote a person who has embarrassed him without permission. So obviously the whole thing was stage managed. But the message from the Indian side was clear, that we are not going to back off. And I think that message has been received. Xi Jinping also pushed his economic agenda, which is the key agenda that China has today, which is Indian endorsement for the Silk Road, which is the one that they have envisaged, starting out from Yunnan, through northern Myanmar, Bangladesh, our northeast, Nepal, or rather Bhutan, Nepal, Pakistan, Central Asia, Turkey, and up to Madrid. It's a rail link. They're also talking about a southern route which moves off from Pakistan and comes down to the Gwadar port, where there'll be a road and rail link. Surveys are already underway for the rail part of it. The road surveys have been completed. It's a $46 billion project, just that bit. Development of the port plus this. The others, of course, it's a multi-billion dollar project, but that's their response to the TPP, and that's their response to the America's Asian pivot. The second is the Maritime Silk Route. He wanted an endorsement for that also. India withheld on both counts. It did not give an endorsement. I think within the government also there was a realization that the Chinese promises have to be seen, whether they really do deliver. And so we signed some agreements on special industrial parks, etc. But the money, of course, is going to take time to come in. And for those of you who track all this, you will find that the Chinese deliver less than 50% of what they promise normally in terms of aid, grant, etc. So I don't expect more than a few, 5, 6, $7 billion to really start coming in. As far as, that's the ballpark. That's how things are shaping up right now. But after Obama's visit, things changed. The Chinese realized that that ambiguity that India had maintained about its relationship with the US is now maybe no longer being retained or valid. India is coming out into the open, tilting in favor of its relationship or a good relationship with the US. And here I would point to 2 or 3 things. One is, apart from the vision statement, which is unusually long, the number of references made by Modi and Obama to the South China Seas, to looking east, meaning actually looking to the western shores of the United States, to the business opportunities that existed between the two, things like this were not lost on Beijing. And that was followed by the 4 defense-related technology projects that were identified under the DITT. The co-development and co-production of 4 projects. And here I would select particularly 2 of them as being extremely important. I'm not talking about the drones. That is something that is doable, it can happen. But I'm talking about the aircraft carrier technology and the jet engine technology. These are 2 which are strategic. These are 2 in which we are going to really compete with China over the longer term. So if this gets going, and I think it is the key, if these 2 projects get going in the next year and a half or 2, at least we start seeing some forward movement, the message will be clear. At the moment, the Chinese have registered this message, and we have seen a softening, apparent softening of position in the last couple of months. And this brings me to today, when the border issue itself is shaping up. There has been talk about early resolution of the border. I don't think it's going to be resolved early, but what I do think the Chinese are doing are shifting the focus. They're doing 2 things here. One, when they talk of the border, they're looking at the eastern sector, basically signaling that the western sector is out of the scope for negotiations or discussion. What is done, Ladakh is ours. Or at least Aksai Chin, etc. is ours. Ladakh, they keep restating their claim. But the eastern sector, they say, is where we have to have discussions. And there have been 4 articles so far by the Chinese, including when Ms. Sushma Swaraj went there, commenting on the fact that it is now India which should suggest out-of-the-box solutions, and that some compromises have to be made in the eastern sector. They've also said that the McMahon line is unacceptable and that India is an illegal occupation of the entire Arunachal. I think when Modi does go to China, which will be around the middle of May, they're working the dates out. It's going to be either 14th or 16th or something like that. There will certainly be talk of the border because they know that we want to talk about the border. But probably the focus will be on fixing a line where the troops of the 2 countries don't cross that line, so that there will be no intrusions that will take place and which will vitiate the atmosphere. I think that will be held up by both leaders as a win-win. Because as I mentioned earlier, in a hardening state and with Xi Jinping emerging with the kind of persona that he has, I don't see him making concessions to us on Arunachal. And here, if I can digress a bit, I'll just make a quick reference to the Tibet factor, I think. In the last couple of months, we have been seeing that getting a higher salience or a higher priority in what the Chinese are saying. Essentially, what they have been doing, ever since their Professor Chin Wei and the chairman of the Tibet Autonomous Region have been traveling abroad, is pushing the line that perhaps some policies were incorrect in their application on Tibet. We can change them. The second was that possibly there were some wrong policies crafted on the religious aspect, but that was done by leaders who don't understand religion, so we can, in other words, correct them. But certainly we don't want a situation of twin Dalai Lamas like we have of twin Panchen Lamas. And Chinwei was quite blunt. She is a very senior faculty member of the Central Party School, handpicked for their political reliability. So when she says something, I think it's something that reflects a view of a higher up. She said we cannot afford that. China just cannot afford that from the point of view of its own stability and sovereignty. So that's a real critical issue. And then at the latest session of the NPC and the CPPCC in March, when we had Pema Choling and Chu Wei-chun coming out with their comments saying that the institution of the Dalai Lama must continue, and basically that he must keep his motherland in mind and not betray his motherland. What they were saying is, we want the Dalai Lama to return to China to fill a void that exists, a religious void that exists, and secondly, we want his reincarnation inside China. So I think, to my mind, as far as India is concerned, this is going to be a factor, in the sense that when I spoke about the focus of the border being on the eastern sector, it's going to zero down to Tawang and Arunachal Pradesh. They're going to link it, as they did in 2005 when they raised it, with the sentiments of the Tibetan people. And that is where they're going to try and apply pressure on India to have some kind of negotiations with them on this. So with that, I'll stop, and I'm open to any question and answers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think as since it came this side, I think
I came on too strong and too powerful.
No, I think microphone is accepting you as the right speaker, me as an intruder here, I think so. So as explained, whenever Ranade speaks, actually speaks not just the issue in broad stroke, but meticulously substantiated with empirical evidence. So, from him, we started with 2012 with Bo Xilai. It came all the way to Xi Jinping and Narendra Modi's election and the geopolitical developments and intricacies and complexities on both sides and where we are. So obviously, as a Tibetan, we are interested where China and India are likely to move accordingly, and how it will reflect on the issue of Tibet and Tibetans in exile. So I'm sure you all have many questions in mind, but broadly I just want to broach one issue, is that obviously China is coming with Silk Road argument, which makes sense when it comes to Central Asia. But now they are coming also with the Silk Route, the maritime route as well, which actually simply doesn't make sense in historical context. But yet it sounds attractive, because Silk Route as a brand is quite well known. But I think Narendra Modi ji and I think some Indian experts have come up with this spice route, which was in fact the historically correct version. Actually, this route was known more for spice route actually. But now, is there a realization in Delhi among the experts, China watchers, that perhaps they waited a little too long for all this to be countered or to respond? Meaning, China has already made a lot of inroads in Sri Lanka, even Maldives, in Nepal and Pakistan. Now, what India is doing is obviously responding, but in its own backyard, not in Southeast Asia or in East Asian countries, whereas China has consolidated its backyard and then moving into Indian territory, that's South Asia. Is there a growing realization that perhaps we were caught off guard, or I think we are a little behind? If so, should we respond quite quickly and quite strongly? Is there a realization, or Modi's trip to Nepal and Bhutan, obviously after 17 years, all that, all are good. But if there is no comprehensive plan to really back it up substantively with the Chinese action, then it will simply be a visit. For example, recently in Nepal, they've increased the aid from $25 million to $125 million. And they're very good in PR. The headlines is China has increased $100 million, even though they might get only 50% of it. But the headlines, that's what grabs attention. Whereas India is actually giving perhaps $500 million or $1 billion every year. That doesn't get the attention per se. So is there a realization that we are really caught off guard, and is it a little too late or not?
You asked a number of questions, but firstly, yes, it is late in the sense that we have actually, I won't say that it's China which has done something, China did, but we ceded ground where we could have taken countermeasures. Had we started 5 to 10 years ago, it would have made things more difficult. We have just allowed others to come and play in our backyard. So to that extent, we are late, but I think things are not irretrievable. Sri Lanka, a change of government has happened. Shall I just say that there was a little bit of help from others in bringing about the change, but it's a good beginning from the north. So it's a good beginning that has happened. Similarly in Nepal, if we look at Modi's visit to Nepal, yes, certain things he could have done, maybe he didn't do because he felt that he was going a bit far, and the Nepalese politicians felt that he was stealing their thunder had he gone to Janakpur and to Lumbini. But the signal that he sent to the Nepalese was actually that we are interested in your power, hydroelectricity thing. The Chinese have no interest in hydroelectric power from Nepal. We are the ones who can draw it. In other words, he promised them a steady source of income for that hydroelectricity. Now here comes the question which you raised. Can we deliver? Can we build it in time, and can we get the thing going? That is where the test will come. But he has given that offer. The second thing he has done is, as India progresses, as India grows, join us and grow with us. In other words, there are a lot of economic opportunities that are going to come your way and which we can open up. He spoke of information highways. That's only one. But that's a straight opportunity for Nepal, which it could get. And today, as you know, Nepal and India have a loose, it's called, I think, an open citizen agreement, whereby they can come to India, they can buy property, they can get married, they can build houses, they get jobs, everything. So they're like Indian citizens. I don't see them doing that with China, no matter how much China opens up. So there are certain things here, and if this effort takes off, the hydroelectric development takes off, and our own economic growth takes off, accompanied by job creation for them, I think we will rectify the balance. Pakistan is a different story, so I won't get into that. As far as the maritime Silk Route is concerned, I agree with you that it is actually the spice route and not what they are saying. But the Chinese, are very good propagandists. So they've started talking about Changhe, that eunuch admiral of theirs who went, and they have started finding relics of Changhe off the coast of Colombo. Now they are saying we might find it somewhere in Madagascar, things like that. They will create their own stories. But I think the whole thing is a cover, primarily for the expansion of the Chinese Navy into the Indian Ocean. And when they're talking about coming there, they're also, if you look at their PLA websites, they're talking about naval bases in the region. And they've identified 19 ports where there is a possibility they're having bases. And they're talking already to Djibouti and to the Walvis Bay. They've identified as two where they can move in. But along the way, what they're trying to do is develop pockets of influence. Again, with a huge infusion of money. Colombo is one, Sri Lanka. Maldives is the other. They tried to make overtures to Seychelles and Mauritius, where I think we have gone and we've made a bid. Those two countries will welcome Chinese assistance, but they're wary of what China can do. And they're also, to some extent, under the influence of the US and France. And I think that will delay Chinese movement into that area. But their main thrust, as far as I can see, is actually naval expansion. They made some groundwork there, but that's their main thing. And I think it's not imminent. It is going to take time, and we have an edge. And if we develop that edge, which is why I referred to the two technologies from the US, co-development and co-production, which is aircraft carrier technology is one of them, then we will be gaining ground there. So by calculations of experts, they say it will take 10 to 15 years for the Chinese to really make a move. And in that time, we hope to get our act ready. So to that extent, I think we are just about in time.
Any question from the audience?
Good afternoon. The economic relationship between India and China has been improving. However, the problem lies in the border issue, like you said before. My question is, you said with the Sushma Swaraj visit to China, you have spoken about a border issue in terms of Western area, and China is ready to talk about it. However, they are not ready to talk about the eastern area. But legally, Arunachal Pradesh is a part of India. And so in terms of that, are you going to accept as what China has commanded, or is Indian government planning to find some ways to resolve this issue as well?
I think I was perhaps not clear. What I said was that the western sector, which is Ladakh, Aksai Chin, etc., is what the Chinese are not willing to negotiate. They are not willing to discuss it. And they've shifted the focus to the eastern sector. So they're basically saying that they're willing to talk about the eastern sector. And in that context, I referred to the Tibet issue coming in and to Tawang being a sticking point. So the eastern sector is what they're going to really focus on, or what they want to focus on. When Sushma Swaraj went there and she met Xi Jinping, she spoke about innovative and out-of-the-box solutions. Now what she was saying is basically that both countries need to think of something different and come out with some new ideas. What the Chinese said was, you've mentioned this out-of-the-box and innovative, so now you suggest something. So by the way, they put themselves off the hook. So that is what has happened, really speaking here. And when you talk of trade and economic relations, yes, of course, we have got an economic relationship with the Chinese, but it's very lopsided. It's actually, the trade deficit is huge. They are buying our raw materials. They're dumping their, cheap manufactured goods here. So it's not a relationship that we are happy with. It's there, but it's a question of our being able to access the Chinese market wherever we have some competence. And that is under discussion between our government and the Chinese. The Chinese make it very difficult, really, for other countries to compete inside China. And that's what we are facing.
I have two questions, one on Arunachal Pradesh and another on Nepal. The first one is, China claims Arunachal Pradesh as southern Tibet and part of China. And whenever Indian leaders like the President or the Prime Minister visit Arunachal Pradesh, China makes tremendous protests. And at the same time, China claims that His Holiness and the Tibetans are citizens of China. So when His Holiness plans to visit Tawang or Arunachal Pradesh, China again makes protests. Then another thing is the Indian officials in Arunachal Pradesh visit China they said you don't require any visa because you are Chinese citizens. So what's your take on His Holiness visiting town is being protested by the Chinese? That's one. Number two, India had great leverage in Nepal. But in recent years, Tibetans in Nepal has been made a milch cow for getting money from the Chinese. So whenever Chinese officials come to Nepal, they thank the Nepalese government for not allowing Nepalese soil for anti-Chinese activities by the Tibetans. At the same time, when Nepalese leaders they visit China, they are being thanked for not allowing Nepalese soil for anti-Chinese activities by the Tibetans. So my question is, India and Nepal has far greater relationship culturally, religiously, geographically. But in recent years, it seems that China had more leverage over Nepal than India. So what I am wondering is, will there be any kind of leverage from the Indian government to have some kind of leverage that Nepalese authorities have a little bit of freedom for the Tibetan people? Because one important thing is, when the Tibetan Administration and His Holiness Dalai Lama has requested the United States to resettle about 3,000 to 4,000 Tibetans living in Nepal to go to there, the Nepalese government refused to give exit permit to the Tibetans. On the other hand, they don't give any rights to the Tibetan people living in Nepal. So I was just wondering what role India can play in this. Thank you.
Very difficult and very good question, but I agree with you that visits to Arunachal Pradesh by our Prime Minister or anyone else should actually trigger no Chinese response, because we claim it's ours. And even if the Chinese do protest, why should we bother about it? It's like our Prime Minister visiting Maharashtra or Kerala or something. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, that's how we should treat it. Unfortunately, we have vacillated on it. Sometimes we have ignored it, sometimes we've been sensitive. Similarly, whether His Holiness goes to Arunachal or he travels anywhere else, is the same thing. He's in India, he's living in India, he travels everywhere else, so why should it be a big deal? But as far as his visits to Arunachal are concerned, I suspect that what the Chinese are particularly concerned about is the Tawang link. And every time he goes there, they wonder whether he's planning something or, he's going to do something about Tawang. I think that is their concern really on Arunachal. Who knows what he does there? Let's see. But I think that's their concern. As far as Nepal is concerned, you're quite right that Nepal has, like any small country, it plays one off against the other, and it is using the Tibet issue and the presence of Tibetans there to get maximum benefit out of the Chinese, who are willing to put money in. But it's not only that. I suspect that as far as China is concerned, it's also a strategic objective. Certainly, they want to ensure that Nepal is not used as a platform by what they call foreign hostile forces to mount operations against them inside Tibet. But they also want to keep India under pressure. And that is why the investments in the rail links, which we are seeing. Already the line from Lhasa has been extended to Shigatse. It was operationalized in August. They're now extending it to Chirong, which is on the border with Nepal. They're also bringing the line up to Ninchur, which lays claim to Arunachal Pradesh, Ninchur prefecture.
Yes.
Yeah. So if that happens, as far as we are concerned, it's strategic pressure on us, because not only can goods move, but so can troops and missiles move on that link. And as far as Nepal is concerned, I would strongly suspect that Nepal is looking at China as an alternate source of supplies in case anything goes wrong with India again. So in terms of, last time they had problems of diesel, kerosene oil, salt, etc., they would look for that. And Nepal had told them that, China had told them that we cannot be an alternate because we don't have those linkages to send you those kind of supplies. But once the rail comes, perhaps that situation will ease. But as I said, the Nepalese will be looking for employment. They will be looking for development of their own country. That is not going to happen with Chinese assistance. The way the assistance is going, it's going to be only pockets of development that take place. So if they want to look for growth, they want to look for a better life, they have to look here. And I suspect if we get our act together, it will happen.
Thank you so much for the insightful talk. My name is Dharamsala. I'm a research fellow at Tibet Policy Institute. Quite recently, we have seen a very controversial article in the Wall Street Journal called The Coming Chinese Cracker by David Schimberg, an eminent Chinese expert. Much has been said and written in both in favor and against the concept of David Schimberg. So, with your presence, I take this opportunity to seek your expert view regarding the very controversial article.
Let me first give you my comments on this imminent Chinese crack-up. A few years ago, when I used to be asked, about 2 years, till about 2 years ago, that is till 2012, how long do I see China carrying on its present trajectory of growth? My answer used to be, short answer used to be, well, for the foreseeable future. But since 2011, 2012, I began saying 5 to 10 years probably. Because I think now we are reaching a stage where things have to change. How they're going to change, I don't know. Whether it's going to be a collapse or not, I don't know. But I don't see the present system, it could continue for maybe another 5 years. But a change is inevitable. I think the manner in which the people are making their demands, the manner in which Xi Jinping has undertaken all these rectification measures within the party, within the army, etc., indicates that he realizes the present structure has to undergo some reform if it has to match up to the changes that the people want. So that is one part of it. But let me also talk about David Schimberg. I know David, of course, but he has been for a long time very, shall I say, friendly, very favorably inclined to the Chinese. And he used to go and teach there. He used to get paid quite handsomely. In fact, at one time I joked with him and I took him out for lunch in Delhi that he should be paying the bill rather than me, because the Chinese have a good arrangement. You know, he was in Georgetown University and he was also going and teaching there, getting a large amount of money. So for him to come out with this assessment is a change, and that is why it has triggered so much discussion and speculation, that here is a person who was very pro and now he is talking about the Chinese system cracking up. So what exactly does it mean? Does it mean that what he is seeing is the Chinese system has become so brittle that it cannot withstand a shock? Or is he exaggerating a point of view? Is he exaggerating an argument? I think that I can't say anything, but I've read quite a few of what he's, quite a few, chapters of what he's written, paragraphs of what he's written. In some places they're a bit thin, I would say. But when you look at the growth, slowing down of growth, it's not a slowdown that has started just now. It was planned earlier in 2007. It has started happening now. But they're also striving with that to have innovation. If that comes, they'll be able to tackle it. If not, they'll be in problems. But he hasn't discussed the manner in which the PLA is being beefed up. He hasn't discussed the Chinese Communist Party itself, how the cleansing that Xi Jinping has started, how that is going to play out. So these are, for me, these are question marks. But in the broad analysis, I think as we were discussing earlier, everything has to change. China will have to change. Whether the present system can continue, I do not know, because the old cadres are not on the scene any longer, the ones who really fought for present day China. And we are seeing different groups of people. We are seeing the youngsters in China, in fact, when I was there last year, the younger lot think differently. They do not have much time for the Chinese Communist Party. They are more busy working, making money by working in private sectors or for foreign companies, which are the preferred companies. It's much like here. And they do all their shopping online. They complain that the prices are too high to live in Beijing. Things like this. So there have to be adjustments made by the Chinese Communist Party. And how those adjustments play out, I don't know. So I haven't answered your question probably, but I can certainly define that or underline the fact that a lot of changes are happening and the leadership will have to be very imaginative to keep pace with it.
Any?
Sir, in relation to your talk, since the Tibetan issue cropped up, I'd like to ask you one question. How would India like a Tibet? A Tibet that is a part of China, which is off through middle way path, which means you have a big brother on your side, or a free Tibet which will be like Bangladesh or something, I don't know, or a Tibet which is vanished because China and India are going to right of Tibet. Within the three situations, what would India like to have?
I think the answer is very straightforward. We would like to have a Tibet that exists as Tibet. We would not like to see, I mean, our problems on the border started when Tibet was swallowed up by China. Till then we had no problems. It is when the Chinese PLA moved into Tibet and took over Tibet that we had a problem. Before that there were no problems. I was just telling someone that in the Asian concept, we had frontiers, we didn't have borders. We had sort of, yes, there is Rudok, it's somewhere there. So the king in Kashmir said, that's mine. You know, the ruler in Lhasa said, that's mine. No one fought about it. As long as the man in Rudok sent a goat there and a yak there, everything was okay. But with the Chinese coming, things changed. So as far as India is concerned, we'd like Tibet to be Tibet. We certainly, as a people, would not like to see a civilization disappear. I think I speak for every Indian on that. No matter in what form, but we wouldn't like a civilization to go. So that's our position. What can we do about it? That's another story. I don't know what we can do about it. But it's another story. And I would only say the fact that the Tibet issue has survived for so long, despite having no real force behind it. When I say force, I'm talking about material force. No guns, no this, no that, no treasuries. Yet it survived. I think that itself is, at least for me, it's a sign of hope. And as far as this present government is concerned, I'm not speaking as a spokesman, but at the swearing-in ceremony, which I referred to in my talk, I think your Sichong was present. Couldn't be a greater message that we sent than having him there. We also had the Taiwanese representative there, by the way. So that was a message, and I think we are quite clear. I don't know if I've made it clear to you or I've confused you, but
as clear as one can be. Yes. Recently, I met some senior BJP executive, I think in Goa somewhere, and they said the Chinese are still complaining that I was there, but I was sitting in the front row ahead of the ambassadors, because I was in the cabinet level row and all the ambassadors were in the B row. So they were still complaining that how come the split is sitting in the row front of the ambassadors. Now, as the Tibet issue came up, now Ranade is not only knowledgeable but also he has soft corner. Is being a really he speaks Chinese. He's true. In true sense, he's a Mandarin. He speaks Mandarin language, also Mandarin in true sense, an expert. But he has also keen interest on the issue of Tibet because his research think tank has employed Tibetan researchers and others who diligently follow everything on Tibet from every source possible. So sometimes he has more information than perhaps our Tibet Policy Institute, who is the main sponsor of the event. But now Tibet issue came up. In your view, in the last 50 years, if you give us a broad stroke as to where Tibet was, Tibet is, and Tibet should be, if you could give us advice and your analysis.
Well, advice I certainly cannot give, but I think 2-3 things I would mention. One is the manner in which the Chinese have been handling the Tibet issue. I think their frustration, if I can use a word, is becoming more and more evident. They don't know how to tackle it. They've used different techniques. They've had a succession of party secretaries who brought in different techniques. The present party secretary, in fact, from what I understand from fairly credible sources, was appointed at the behest of Xi Jinping. And he's come in with an agenda for development. But what is happening is, he's encouraging a kind of Hanization taking place under the garb of development. He has not gone in for forceful, or shall I say, visible persecution or hard fist approach as far as Tibetans, but he has done it more surreptitiously. He has strengthened he's introduced this grid system in Tibet, in Lhasa and Tibet, whereby you have a police response within 3 minutes of an incident, which means the surveillance systems, I mean, I'm looking at it from that point of view, surveillance systems have been refined. He's gone in for a party representative in every village. I think there are 5,400 and some villages there. In every village, they're going to have a party rep, which means there's a surveillance in every village. That is the way they are trying to tackle it from within. At the same time, what we referred to earlier, these overtures urging the senior-most spiritual leader to return to China indicates a sense of despair that they're not able to tackle it. For their Central Party school person to come out, Chinwei, and say that we cannot afford to have, for our own stability and survival, we cannot afford to have a situation of twin Dalai Lamas like we have twin Panchen Lamas. Then we had this unprecedented event of Xiaonan, who was a provincial level United Front chap, releasing a small telecast through BBC of his meeting in Dharamsala, where actually he spells out his invitation that please come because we have a religious void which we'd like you to fill. And he also shows in that, takes this BBC guy around, show him his house. Now, he's supposed to be a communist United Front official. His house where there's a puja room with the Dalai Lama's photograph in a private place. It is very strange. But to me, these are signs that the leadership feels it just cannot tackle this problem. And the biggest fear is 7 million Tibetans at some point in the future becoming potential terrorists. Today they are following a path of non-violence, and yet we find that Tibet is restive, Tibet is troubled, there are self-immolations taking place. If it had been violence, if it had been attacks, the Chinese would have been able to handle it. With the immolation, they just don't know what to do. I think this is the biggest problem that they find. And as I said, things are changing. People are becoming wealthier. As your belly start filling, you start thinking also. So there they are also demanding more freedom. There are protests against the party cadres. There are protests against the high-handedness of the government officials. So they are also going to start questioning various policies that are taking place. And with people going towards Buddhism, may not be Tibetan Buddhism, but Buddhism, it's a religious release. There will be a little more understanding of another man who's thinking of religion than a person who's not. So I think we are seeing this change happening there. And what Tibet is going to evolve into, I do not know. But I strongly suspect that in the future, there may be some kind of accommodation, if I may call it, between the Chinese and the Tibetans for some kind of a federal arrangement maybe, or maybe independence. But I don't see them being swallowed up at the moment. I mean, I see no signs of that. Even if there is a Hanization of Tibet, I think the manner in which the people have remained firm doesn't to me suggest that they're going to give it up easily. So the concept will remain, and I think the fervor will remain. I don't know if I've answered you, but...
In India as well, Tibet in India.
In India, I think, I don't know, in India, I think we should try and, I get conflicting opinions actually on what should happen, whether they should be, shall I use a word, that they should be, you know, space should be made for them within the system, within the government, etc., or whether they should be left to find their space. These are questions which are not very clear. I get different responses from the youngsters. But as far as India is concerned, I think more and more we are finding IITC that at a popular level, there is certainly a lot of sympathy and a lot of support. At the governmental level also, it may not be enunciated, but the support, and I'm sure a person like you knows, the support is there at different levels. I mean, some people may be more supportive, some people may be less supportive, some people cannot say anything, but there is a favorable mood towards the Tibetan cause, towards the Tibetan people, and I think that will remain. How we can improve the conditions is something that I think government needs to look at. But
while someone think of a question, actually there was a blog, rather interview, in which a daughter of a high-ranking official was quoted as saying, we don't know how to tackle the Tibet issue, and Han Chinese also wonder, what is this, person in monk robe with slipper on, with just slipper, barter slipper. We simply don't know how to handle His Holiness Dalai Lama. He's just a simple monk, roaming around the world with slipper, and with China all its might is not able to handle. Similarly, if you compare Xinjiang, Inner Mongolian and Tibet issue, China has issued 2 white papers on Xinjiang, none on Inner Mongolia, 1 on Hong Kong recently, and 11 on Tibet.
yes,
So it means they're also, I mean, if you have Xinjiang-like issue, they can handle it violently with military. If it's a Mongolian-like issue, they can just kind of ignore it. But then a Tibet issue is non-violent yet active and loud. So they have to issue 11 white papers, and still they continue to do so. So you can clearly see that our strategy, the non-violent but vocal and active around the world, I think it's clearly reflected in their way of responding as well. Yes. With that, any other questions? Long. Long. Any other questions? Yes,
well, no other cause
Yes.
has really had that much support, international support in the Tibet cause.
That's true. Yeah.
Sometimes when I have a concern, like when Prime Minister Modi came to power with huge mandate, and as on one end, as you were saying, he's a nationalist, and for that matter, perhaps we do not have to worry about compromising on the body issues, for instance, and also, for that matter, Tibet issue as well. But on the other hand, when he got a huge mandate, and when you look at the reason why he got that huge mandate, there is a lot of expectation from the Tibetan people from him. And one would move, the biggest reason is also the economic development that he brought in the state of Gujarat. So perhaps now when Prime Minister likes to fulfill the expectations of his people, and the economic development is certainly going to be at the top priority. So sometimes it led me perhaps to wonder if, for instance, China offers a huge economic development offer. Is it possible, or is there any possibility for President Modi to compromise on the border issues? So that's kind of worry that sometimes I have. Do you think it is something that we should be worried about? That's my question, please.
The short answer and definite answer is no. Two reasons. One is, yes, the Chinese will offer a lot of money. More than that, they will try and pump his ego also when he goes, and they'll look after him very well. But, just think about his background and how he came out. What was the training ground that he had? It was the RSS. And who is the one who helped him come here? Who is the one who worked at the elections? It was the RSS. So he has actually, to satisfy the RSS also, that I haven't compromised. So that is the first safeguard that you have. I don't think you need one, but I'm just giving you. The second, the people in this country, particularly the youth, who are increasing in number and who are the ones who voted for him and who are going to vote for him, they have demanded an economically better off time. They have demanded jobs, and he has to deliver. He has got a short window in which to deliver. But he realizes that while he is creating this, he needs to have manufacturing capability. He's also got to raise the skills of the people. So he's working on that. These same people are the ones who get very upset and excited when there are reports of intrusions in Indian newspapers and in Indian TV. So when they hear that he is striking a deal with the Chinese, it's not going to wash. And the third is that he has got a person like Kiran Rijiju in the cabinet from Arunachal. So I don't see any cause for worry. And there are people like me who are mentioning it here that they are looking at the eastern sector, and there are many more who are going to raise a noise. So I don't think it will happen. India, that way, one thing is we can all say what we want and the guys have to listen.
Sorry, I'm taking the second chance. You mentioned about Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh. Basically, Chinese policies that if there's any dispute which are under them, they don't want to discuss about it, like Tibet. They say the issue of Tibet is already decided. The issue of Hong Kong, when Hong Kong was not part of China, they said there's a problem, we want to negotiate. Then now the issue of Taiwan, they want to negotiate. But now the issue is, China says that territorial, Chinese sovereignty and territorial issue is non-negotiable, it's their co-issue. So now Aksai Chin is under China. So they don't want to negotiate because that's under them. Now the issue is Arunachal Pradesh. Arunachal Pradesh is under India. So they think that it's disputed. So they are trying to focus more on Arunachal Pradesh to resolve that, and maybe so many other gives and takes or whatever. But what is the stand of Indian government on Aksai Chin? If China thinks that it's already decided and they don't want to discuss, but they talk about Arunachal Pradesh. So what's India's stand on Aksai Chin?
As far as our parliament is concerned, which is the supreme body, in 1963 they passed a resolution on Aksai Chin, where they have reasserted our position that it's ours. So that is a legal position. The government cannot today negotiate away Aksai Chin, like it cannot negotiate away anything else. What it can try and do is try and sell to the people the fact that we have arrived at a practical solution of an exchange. That too, if the people accept, they'll have to prepare the ground for it. But in legal terms, Aksai Chin, our demand stands, because if we give up Aksai Chin, the next claim will be on Ladakh. And they've already claimed J&K, they've declared that a disputed state. So I don't think that is the question. As far as their position on negotiating on Arunachal and not negotiating there, that's their view. But we will certainly discuss Aksai Chin, like we are discussing POK and that Shaksam Valley which has been ceded to them. We raise that. We also raise the fact that they are involved in over 35 construction activities, infrastructure construction in POK, Gilgit-Baltistan area, which is inimical to us. It's disputed territory. It's actually Indian territory occupied by Pakistan. They've ignored it. But these are factors that we raise with them, which I'm just mentioning to underline to you that we are not going to let, Aksai Chin or just go like that. It is a negotiating posture. Ultimately, we may have to decide on where is, basis, but that will be at a later stage. We are not giving up our claim. And I don't think we are giving up Arunachal either. Few kilometers here, there, we can always talk about, but otherwise, no. And Tawang, certainly not.
Very short question. I was wondering whether is there an expectation from the government of India vis-a-vis government of India's position on the or claim on the whole Arunachal Pradesh? Expectation from the CTA, sort of a statement which will strengthen the position of government of India that states.
I think it was in 2007 was the last statement made by the Dalai Lama on Arunachal, saying that, in fact on Tawang and Arunachal, and then I think that was maybe there was a contact between his envoys and the Chinese around the same time, where the Chinese were very critical and very upset. So our hands have been strengthened despite British efforts to weaken them, because they have sort of talked about sovereignty being outdated concept and all that on the border. But that's okay. I think we are okay on Arunachal.
Okay, final question.
Yeah, I'm Putin from Homes Department. My question is that several countries, including US and European nations, has on various occasions requested and speaks to ask Chinese government to resolve Tibetan issues through middle way policy by granting Tibet a genuine autonomy. Even though Indian government has been very grateful to us for hosting His Holiness Dalai Lama and Tibetan people over here in India, but as per my knowledge, Indian government for the past many years has not spoken about, or asked Chinese government to resolve Tibetan issues through middle policy by granting Tibet a genuine autonomy, nor Tibetan issue has been raised in Indian Parliament. So is it that Indian government wants Tibetan refugees to stay in India permanently, or is it that Indian government has lost their hope on Tibet or Tibetan issues, or is it that Indian government is waiting for Tibet to regain its independence? So,
if you could comment on middle way as general.
I think I should use a Chinese phrase, we believe in actions and not words. So as far as we are concerned, you're staying here and you're welcome to stay here. I think that itself is more support than many other countries have given in pragmatic terms. I'm not sort of saying one is more than the other, but I'm just making a point. As far as India's wish about Tibet is concerned, yes, we haven't raised it with them, but on occasion, senior Indian personages, maybe retired foreign secretaries or whatever, senior people, including politicians, have raised the issue of Tibet, and of course not in government but outside, and suggested to the government that China needs to rethink its policies on Arunachal and J&K. Otherwise, we need to rethink our recognition of TAR as a part of China. So that issue has been raised. It's not that it hasn't been raised. As far as China is concerned, they're not going to raise it with us, we're not going to raise it with them. And as you're saying about free Tibet or middle way, I think frankly middle way and I say that to people, is the most strategic policy that the Tibetans have crafted. It is the most strategic policy. It means neither this nor that. Whatever you do, it keeps the Chinese off balance. It keeps, tremendous room for maneuver. And whichever path you take, I mean, that's how you survive till now, frankly. And when the Tiananmen events were happening, I had a lot of friends among the protesters. And I used to spend actually every night in the square. I used to come back to my embassy at about 2, 3 in the morning. And I used to ask them among various things about the Tibet issue. I found none of these so-called democracy activists talking about a free Tibet. But many of them spoke about the wrongs being done on Tibetans or in Tibet, and about how Tibet should be given greater freedom or greater autonomy and all that. So that's why I said that there is, within a larger concept, they are looking at various things. Those were youngsters, they were not in power, but I'm just giving you an idea of how they think. Free Tibet and all, I don't know, but I think middle way also is not something that the government is going to give, the Chinese government. They've been quite clear about it. But as a strategy, I think it's the best strategy that could have been formulated. I don't know how it was formulated, but it has stood the test of time. That's what I tell the younger Tibetans when I talk to. I said, had you gone in for independence, or had you gone in for a certain, defined what your end goal was, you could have been cornered. And you may not have got that much support. Today you're getting a lot of support because of this concept of middle way, which is give me a bit of this, give me a bit of this, give me a bit of this, and then, I'm all yours. So, I'm just putting it as a, but really that's how it is.
With that note, I think, actually officially, we do say middle way is very clear.
Yes.
But as an analyst, you can say what you want. We have put in writing, but again, it has a lot of little bit of everything. Yes, that we agree. Yes. So with that note, once again, I would like to thank Ranade ji for coming all the way to Dharamsala and sharing with us his thoughts and ideas, profound really, and impactful as well. And not only here, while in Delhi or anywhere he travels, he always he's not only the eminent expert on China in India, but he's closely connected with the Indian government. So inside and outside, wherever he travels, he always speaks about Tibet. So that way we are extremely grateful. And we all fully know and appreciate that the Indian government has done the most for Tibetans. And India and this great nation and Indian people have done the most for Tibetans. Actually, because the largest number of Tibetans are in India, the CTA is in India, and obviously His Holiness Dalai Lama has been the honored guest of India. So that way, I think on behalf of CTA staff members and all the people in India, inside Tibet, we are extremely appreciative of what India has done. And without India and Indian government support, Indian people's support, we would not be here. On the one hand, you said we have huge international support, but this is the base. This is the center. And this center is possible mainly because of the Indian government. So we are extremely appreciative of everything that the Indian government has done, and particularly like friends like you, who will make noise inside and outside to keep it going. So hence, once again. I want to say thank you very much. They already clapped again. Clap one more time. Thank you very much. Thank you.